everybody, this is Rebecca with MyCrazyJourney, and also, oops, sorry, let me close this window. I have things popping up. Okay, so I am live in Empowered Autoimmune for the Autoimmune Mastermind. First of all, thank you, Allie, for having me, and thank you for everyone who would give everybody just a few minutes to kind of tune into this talk. If you're catching the replay, I will come back later and answer questions. So I'm just going to kind of wait a few minutes. So my name is Rebecca Mills Anderson. I am a certified health coach. I run a blog called MyCrazyJourney and also work with Integrative Health Center of Alabama, where I work under a functional medicine doctor and help people with autoimmune, neurological, and related disorders. And so related disorders would be things like endocrine disruption, as well as digestive issues or anything in the mystery illness category. So give everybody just a few minutes. Okay, so I'm going to be doing 3 talks on the Autoimmune Mastermind. And excuse me, I keep looking over here because I made some notes. Otherwise, my thoughts will be very jumbled and overwhelming and not connected or organized. So made a couple notes, so I'll be using that cheat sheet. I'm going to be doing 3 talks. The first one will be about CIRS or CIRS. I've been taught to say CIRS, so if you say CIRS, I'm sorry for my mispronunciation. It's also called Chronic Inflammatory Response Syndrome. As I said, I'm a certified health coach. I was certified by Integrative Institute for Integrative Nutrition. And my perspective will be a little bit different from doctors with mold education and experience, mainly because my scope of practice is mainly diet and lifestyle. Also, decisions are still made based upon the labs that a qualified doctor provides. Now, I want to speak a little bit about a qualified doctor. Many doctors are not familiar with CIRS and don't know about chronic inflammatory response syndrome. They haven't heard about it and they have not researched it. They don't know how to test for it, and not every lab is the same. So getting qualified by somebody who understands these differences and the ins and outs and the caveats is very, very important. Hi to Christina, hi to Kaylee. Really glad you're here, and glad you're excited to be here. So thank you for being here. So in my own practice, my cases are managed by a certified functional medicine doctor, and we work on these cases as a team. So these recommendations that I give are my own opinions and not to be taken as medical advice. So I just want to repeat, thank you for all of that. I'm going to repeat, I am not a doctor, and what's more importantly is that I am not your doctor. So I don't want anybody to take this as medical advice. This is just me speaking from my experience in addressing these cases in my clinic. I am also a specialist. So I'm not just a health coach, I'm a specialist in autoimmune and neurological disorders. As a root cause of both of these, the CIRS that is, my career has led me to one of those root causes, and that's CIRS. Also called mold illness, biotoxin illness, multiple chemical sensitivity, chronic idiopathic inflammation, and has many other names in the medical field. It is commonly misdiagnosed as MS, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, mast cell activation disorder, POTS or dysautonomia, which I will be doing my 3rd talk on, approaching this from a functional medicine standpoint, and is linked to gluten ataxia, which is when someone is celiac and then a couple of years later the celiac starts affecting their brain and their neurological system. Celiac disease itself is highly linked and overlapped with this disorder, and when testing for this disorder, I often find that my patient is also carrying celiac disease. Now, I'm not going to go heavy into celiac disease, but at this point when I find that gene, we have one of 2 things. By this time, the person is usually gluten-free, so there's a debate of whether or not to test them for celiac disease. But by knowing they carry it, I can make one of 2 assumptions, either that they are celiac or that they are pre-celiac. Now, this is a term that is not often used. I've kind of coined it myself, and we'll be discussing more about that and diet as related to CIRS and also celiac disease when these cases become neurological in an upcoming book that I'm writing called MyCrazyJourney, when you're gluten-free and you're still having symptoms. So this is one of those cases that would be like that. So pre-celiac could still give you many of the same symptoms and complications and inflammation, even neurological, from having gluten in the diet. This would cause things like ADD, bipolar depression, and anxiety disorders. These can happen in small children and later can turn into celiac disease in these individuals. So the other things that it is often misdiagnosed with is bipolar, schizophrenia, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, MS and lupus, depression and anxiety, ADD, migraines, and more. So before I dive into this, I want to tell you a little bit more about me. In addition to being a certified health coach, I've also been diagnosed with celiac, gluten ataxia, Hashimoto's, subclinical Sjogren's, rheumatoid arthritis, endometriosis, and POTS, just to name a few. I have been able to reverse all of those diseases only using food, lifestyle, and some functional medicine. But 99% of my journey has been to use food and lifestyle. I'll explain that in a minute. In the last stages of my healing journey, I have stumbled upon the root cause of all these illnesses, even those that started in early childhood. With the investigation into CIRS, which I will be talking about today, is where I found that root cause behind all of them and why I started having symptoms even as a small child. I started with symptoms as early as 5 years old, and this all became life-altering in 2003 with chronic fatigue syndrome. And by 2014, I was unable to groom and feed myself. Because of my gluten ataxia, I was unable to take 99% of the medicines, and the ones that I were able to take were useless to me and caused more problems than they solved. After visiting several doctors in several states and being told that they could not help me, including by my own, hello Leslie, thank you for joining us, and being told by my own doctor who'd been with me since 2008 that she really just didn't have a lot of answers, even from a functional standpoint, I had to figure things out for myself. So figuring out how to help myself is what led me to an investigation of these diseases upon my own. Upon investigating, I discovered that the information was out there, but that no one was putting the information together. Through blending various protocols and developing one of my own called the CEP, or Celiac Elimination Protocol, I was not only able to reverse all of my conditions, but am now helping others with their own unique blends of mystery illnesses and related things. So combining this experience with functional medicine has allowed me to help others who have been failed by the medical community, left without help and left without answers. So this pretty much sums up my mission statement, is to make sure that they no longer have that. Thank you. Thank you, Allie, for leaving that. I will be taking questions specifically at the end that I can't get in the future right now. So while I'm using my cheat sheet. In my clinical practice, we have been addressing a common find with these mystery illnesses and developing our own way of addressing their individual requirements based on their needs, their goals, and also based on their choices, because not everybody is as dedicated or willing or physically, mentally, and emotionally ready to jump in feet first and do everything to the nth degree. So we want to help them where they are, and that's very important. So we help them starting with the basics, and then we build up their strength so that they can tackle some of the bigger tasks if they choose to. At the end of the talk, I will be giving out a free handout that is usually exclusive to my patients who are dealing with this issue. But I'm making an exception for the attendees today so they can get this handout to help them with their own journey. So please stay until the end so I can tell you how to get that handout today. This handout will outline parts of my talk and give you some actionable steps to help you in your healing journey. So I confessed, as I did a few minutes ago, that I am using a cheat sheet. There is so much information. I'm glad you guys are really appreciative of the handout. It's a very helpful handout, really meant to simplify things for you. This can be the subject can be very convoluted, very difficult, very complex, very overwhelming. Just in learning about it, I constantly had to take walks and meditate to avoid the overwhelm just from gathering the information, much less activating it in my own life. So I've tried to make it just as simple as possible for people who are already dealing with brain fog, etc. So for that reason, I've created a cheat sheet to try to keep my thoughts organized in order to help you. So it's very, very complex. So if I don't see your question, then please stay tuned to the end. I'm going to take questions and go through I see that other people have experienced the complexities as well. So I'm going to simplify this greatly. Before we get started, send me up some hearts and let me know if you've been suffering from any conditions that I mentioned, whether they be autoimmune, neurological, dysautonomia, lupus, multiple sclerosis, fibromyalgia, any mental, emotional, neurological disorders such as depression, anxiety, or concentration-based disorders, or any mystery illness that you are just confused as to where it came from. I see a lot of hearts going up right now. Oh, I see an MS. Yeah, that one's very close to my heart. Has a big relation to gluten ataxia. So asthma from mold. Me too. It's the worst. So we're going to get started. If you guys are ready to get started, I'm ready. And I am so excited because this is one of my favorite things to talk and educate about. So first I want to get a little bit of a definition. This illness is called CIRS or CIRS, C-I-R-S. That stands for chronic inflammatory response syndrome. We also have mold and biotoxin illness is also what this is referred to, but I kind of don't like that name because it involves a lot more than mold and involves a lot more than biotoxins. It also involves multiple chemical sensitivities, which that's one of the other names for this, as well as the biotoxins also can include having chronic inflammation from the toxins from a former Lyme infection that your body can't get rid of the toxins. So this happens when somebody has Lyme disease and they eradicate the infection, but they're still sick. And that's because they are reacting to the toxins that have stored in their body and continue to wreak inflammatory. See a lot of great answers over here from one of my earlier questions. So thank you all for that. So every case is very different. And in order to explain why every case is so incredibly different, I want to go a little bit into the diagnosis, because this diagnosis really reveals why every case is so incredibly different. So in one person, it could give them hemolytic anemia. In another person, it might give them multiple sclerosis. In another person, it might turn on their celiac gene and eventually turn on their gluten ataxia. On another person, they would have dysautonomia, and some people get all of the above. Some people only have Lyme, some people have this or that, and when you go through the diagnosis process, it really explains why different people have it. Doesn't really, not so much as the why, but the how. So there's a little bit of controversy over how to get diagnosed. Now, the founder of this phenomena, CIRS, is a guy named Dr. Richie Shoemaker. He's written some wonderful books. He has a great website called survivingmold.com. And he has researched, tracked the data, done the testing, and does everything from a scientific doctor's point of view to establish this disease, establish a way of treating it, etc. He is a conventional medical doctor, so his ways are generally conventional medicine and pharmaceutical. But in doing so, you end up taking a large amount of thank you for putting that website on there. That is a great resource. He also, I want to real quick stop, and Allie has put on the website, in there is a list of symptoms. It gives about 34 symptoms. If you have any significant number of these symptoms, it's reason to get checked. I've seen people come back positive with as little as 10 or 12 symptoms, and have people have all the way up to every single one of them and then some. So just FYI. Okay, so to go back to the diagnosis, good thing I have these notes to keep me organized. There's a little bit of controversy. So Shoemaker does a battery of tests. He does several different inflammation markers, and they're all different forms of inflammation. These different inflammation markers tell us different things. For example, there is one inflammation marker that would be linked to lupus, such as the inflammation that attacks your blood vessels. There's other ones that are linked to lungs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Dr. Daniel Nathan, who was a Shoemaker certified practitioner and then went off on his own tangent, has questioned this diagnosis criteria. So when you go into Shoemaker and you get all these inflammation markers, wholesale, they cost about $2,000 just for the test. Dr. Nathan criticizes this and says, well, you can get all this information, it'll tell you you're inflamed, but it doesn't tell you where you're coming from. And I agree with Dr. Nathan on that part. We have all these inflammation markers, but there's still so much more to be found out with that. And the question is are they telling us what we already know? chances are that if you are having these symptoms and you're having these experiences, we already know that you're inflamed. So proving that a duct is a duct is really questionable of whether or not that is necessary or cost effective. To give you a kind of example of why cost effective can be an issue is that let's just say you went to a shoemaker doctor. The very first visit could run you a minimum of $2,000. I'm sorry, $5,000. 2,000 of that would be testing, and 3,000 of it would be the office visit, because he spends a couple hours of you doing complete physical and a very long medical history, which are all great and wonderful. But you would have to do these tests multiple times depending on what came back, and that's the $5,000 is assuming he went wholesale and did not profit on the labs. So as you can see, this can get very expensive. So making informed decisions based on what you're really looking for is very key in that in this process. So Dr. Nathan says that with these inflammation markers, it doesn't tell you whether or not they are for mold. So he does a mycotoxin urine test. However, you can get very false positives with this mycotoxin, false negatives, excuse me. So what happens is that you have these mycotoxins, which are the toxins from the mold or chemicals or what have you in your body, but your body can't release them, so they're not in the urine. So Dr. Nathan sends you to an infrared sauna to get you to release them. For some cases, this can be extremely uncomfortable and maybe even dangerous. We have some only a doctor can make that call, or you can make that call, or a combination. But I'm very cautious about it, because with people who are heat sensitive, for people who have POTS and dysautonomia, for people who have neurological disease, heat sensitivity is a big issue, blood pressure issues. This could land them in bed for weeks and could give any of these people a flare because of releasing these toxins into their bloodstream instead of being stored where they are. So it also, I believe there's another way to find out if you are dealing with this. The one thing that we all agree on is that you start with an HLA test. And an HLA test is incredibly invaluable. So first of all, it tells us what you are genetically predisposed to. There can be several different answers. Now, when you get this HLA test, it has to come from certain labs, and it has to be interpreted by a qualified practitioner. Once interpreted, this gives us the bulk of our knowledge. We know what kind of duck we're dealing with, to use my metaphor. So basically, I have the theory that if it has the genetics of a duck, and it walks like a duck, and it talks like a duck, and it responds like a duck, we're dealing with a duck. And so that's my way of trying to cut down costs for these people while still getting the information that I absolutely have to help them address these issues. So it tells me whether or not you have one of the genetic combinations to qualify for a CIRS or chronic inflammatory response syndrome. It also tells me what you are prone to. So this interpretation tells me if you are mold sensitive. It tells me if you are Lyme toxin sensitive. It tells me if you are chemically sensitive. It tells me if you are prone to chronic fatigue and syndrome long term. It also tells me if you are at danger for taking Gardasil, the HPV vaccine specifically. It can also tell me if you are all of the above, which is possible, and that's what they call the dreaded combo. I hate that name, but it's very important information. With this, we can warrant of whether or not to do further testing. So at that point, I would recommend doing further testing so that when you're ready to address your environment. For some people who are dealing with this horrible illness, addressing their environment is either not financially, physically, or emotionally and mentally feasible just yet. And it's for those people that I really want to speak to today, because this is very overwhelming. And for many people, they don't start by fixing their physical environment. Even if you choose to start there, this could take 6 months to a year to either remediate your house properly, as well, or to find a house that is clean enough to be acceptable for you. There are people dealing with this who choose to go live in tents, who live out in the woods, who are couch surfing until they can find a better environment, who have been on this journey for years and have never found an acceptable environment. So if you can't fix your environment, then you really need to know, what can I do? So I want to make a couple other notes before I really go into some of that, some of the how to do this. And first of all, I see a question. It says, it asked me about Rebecca's 23andMe show HLA test. Well, it's not just an HLA test, it's an HLA-DRB. And it has to be done by one specific lab. If you get it done by the wrong lab, it's said by Dr. Shoemaker to be the wrong test. And then when you get it, if you don't know how to interpret it, the information is absolutely useless to you. So interpreting that is key, and that will tell you how to do that. This is not done by 23andMe. It is not a regular HLA test. HLA test, well, HLA just means a gene test, but an HLDRB is a specific test. And done by that specific lab means it's done under certain conditions so that you can have an accurate testing, and then to have it converted is a really big deal. If you've already had the Gardasil vaccine, the healing protocol is the same as all biotoxin illness. That was asked by Jamie. Yes and no. So yes, it is the same. So with the protocol to deal with the biotoxin illness, you're dealing with two elements. Number one is to reduce the toxic burden and open up the toxic pathways to prevent future overburden of the system. But you're also trying to get rid of the toxins that are already stored in your body, because this disease is defined as having a genetic combination that disables you from getting rid of these toxins. So let me give you an example. You have somebody with this one of these genetic combinations. 80% of the cases have mold toxicity, so I'm going to speak a lot from there. But for the other 20, we're still talking about chemical sensitivity, Lyme toxins, etc. And many of them are the combo of all of the above. So if you are already storing toxins, yes, you can get rid of them. There are ways. It's very complex, and I'll go into some beginner ways today, and the more complex ways are something I'd have to teach someone over about a 6-month to 8-month or a longer period, depending on the case. But there's two parts. Number one, reducing your toxic burden and opening up those toxic pathways, and then addressing the stored ones. So these people with the gene combination, in detoxification, there's 3 phases of detoxification. There's one where you neutralize it and take it out to the door, take the trash out. Number 1, where you can't neutralize it, so your body has to go through a different process and go a little bit deeper before it can neutralize it. And then phase 3 is where we escort the trash to the door. In these people, they do not make the antibody that the rest of the world has, so they cannot neutralize the toxin. And so they can never get rid of it. So therefore it tries to go into phase 2, it tries to go into phase 3, and it can never get out of the body. Instead, it starts cycling around in the bile, going through the intestine because it thinks it's going to be able to neutralize it there, and eventually just stores it in the fatty tissue, usually the nerves, the blood vessels, the brain, and other neurological tissue. So that is what happens. So for these people, we really have to jump in and give their body assistance to get rid of the stored toxins, as well as reduce the incoming toxins. So as you can see, this could get very complex. So I'm going to make some of those notes before I tell you some of the ways to get started. I'm going to make some of the notes that I wanted people to know. So the question with the diagnosis is the gene and the symptoms enough? A few helpful tests such as C4A, not a C4-3, not a C4, but a C4A, again, has to be by specific labs, and an MSH, again, by specific labs. They will tell you what you need your ERMI or HERTSMI score to be. An ERMI or HERTSMI score is a way of testing the house. I'll go into some of the things not to do, and one of those things to do without guidance is test your house. You will waste a lot of time and money if you try to take action without educating yourself first, or finding someone who is educated in doing these things so that you can not waste a whole bunch of time and money doing so and not helping yourself. Some people find the VCS, which is a visual contrast sensitivity test, helpful. I have found this less helpful at the beginning and more helpful later after someone we know they have the gene. Only 92% of cases come back positive on the VCS. All this means on the VCS, it's a very inexpensive test available on the Shoemaker website, survivingmold.com. It tells us whether there's neurological damage to the eyes, but not every case has neurological damage. So if I have somebody who has CIRS and they don't have neurological damage, but it's expressing another way, such as chronic viruses, chronic illness, chronic horrible chronic fatigue, Hashimoto's, etc., this VCS can be very misleading if you're one of the 8% that doesn't come back positive and still has this disease. So for that reason, I wait for people to do that a little bit later, even though it's very inexpensive. Other notes is that 80% of the cases are triggered by water-damaged buildings. Many are also triggered by chemicals, in many cases both. Some are layered with Lyme or the propensity for Lyme. While their bodies are still sick after treatment and the infection is killed, the toxins from Lyme are still there. So getting that specific gene test will help narrow down your case for you and tell you where to look. So that right there is a lot of information. So I'm going to let us take a breath and remember that it's not the mold, it's the mycotoxins. Now, the one thing that complicates this is that when someone carries a celiac gene, which would be a C2, a DQ2, or DQ8, but also a DQ3. A DQ3 is 1/2 of the DQ2 allele, and a mold exposure is enough to turn that on and give someone celiac disease, as well as all the complications that come with this illness. So for those people, we might get mast cell activation disorder, where they are reacting to the mold in 2 different ways, both as a cross-reactive, but also as a celiac, and that is where things get crazy. So why does the mold outdoors not bother some of these people, and the mold indoors does? A lot of people find relief by spending more time outdoors, including, as I mentioned, some people go and live in tents. I know a woman who had a tent in her backyard and only went in to use the bathroom or the dishwasher. And so she did a lot better. So here's the reason how it was explained to me. Mold outdoor, there are, say, 1,000 species. I'm just throwing out a number. There could be millions of species. And they all produce their little toxin to kind of protect their territory. This toxin sends off a warning to every other mold in the area. And therefore, the mycotoxin is very small. And all the other toxins are producing their toxin that are keeping that mold in check. So imagine each mycotoxin only having like 1 to 5 parts per million. And again, I'm just making up numbers just for example's sake. Indoors, we don't have all the different types. So you have 1 or 2 or a handful of mold that don't have their natural enemies keeping them in check and at small amounts. So therefore, their mycotoxins and their ability to produce it become exponential and become to this level that they start to become toxins to our own body. As I said before, many people are able to produce the antibodies, neutralize it, and the body just naturally takes to its door. That's 75% of the population. However, with 25% of the population, we are unable to neutralize it. So that can cause a big problem. I'm finding that in my office, that inability to neutralize that toxin is much higher. I would say that most of my cases are CIRS patients. And to be honest, I just started screening for this within the last couple of months, and I have not had one come back negative yet. Doesn't mean there won't be, but that's a lot of positive test results. So you have a couple options on how to address this. So you can go to a shoemaker doc, which is what is usually recommended, and they will follow the shoemaker protocol, which is definitely an option. You can also go to other docs who have their way of dealing things, such as those who deal with it, Dr. Daniel Nathan, or another way of dealing it is the way my clinic does. My clinic breaks it down into stages. We start with where you are, we start with the basics, we start with what you can do today. Then we move on to what you can do next, some of the things that are a little bit harder, and then we go on to the hardest things, because we know that even if you did the hardest things first, you would still need to do some things to take your body back now, because it takes 6 months to 2 years to address your physical environment, and that's the hardest part. Some people also, while they're in this imperfect environment, such as a mold, are able to, a moldy house, are unable to do some of the traditional ways of doing it, and some are able to. There's controversy over when to do this, and so for that reason, I say that there's a bio-individual. Some people can handle it earlier, and some people cannot. Just depends on where you are, how open your detox pathways are, how sick you are, etc., and what you're using. So let's get started with the where to start. So with the debate over timing of how you start treatment and that kind of stuff, I'm going to go by my experience. The ones who get worse on the detox are the ones that are the most food sensitive, because most detoxes have cross reactives, and this can be a way for me to find out if how sensitive somebody is and how severe to be on the protocol. So this needs to be put under control first. With many of my cases, most of them come back carrying celiac genes, and even if the gene is not turned on, then they can still have food sensitivities to these items causing their triggers. Now, I want to repeat that the mold is enough to be turning on these celiac genes. Even if you only had half of a celiac allele, the mold exposure would be enough to turn it on. So we would put the food sensitivities under control first and use food to reverse the damage that has been done to the body. So we would be blending, custom blending protocols based on the person's individual situation to reverse things like neurological damage, blood vessel damage, circulation. We would use using targeted nutrition for their adrenals. We would be addressing hormonal imbalances, all the things basically to make them feel better and to get them stronger so that they can deal with the root cause to the root cause, and that is getting these toxins that are stored out of the system. So first we're going to use food to remove triggers and use food to address the damage that is done to the body. So that there's a lot we can do there. To kind of give you an idea of how powerful food and lifestyle is on this journey, I can have someone never fix their physical environment and get 95% well using just food and lifestyle. This can enable someone who is a complex case, someone who is bedridden and unable to feed and groom themselves, can get to somewhere where they can work full time, exercise, have a social life, and have a completely full life, although it will need to be maintained through diet and lifestyle and functional medicine support. For those who that's not good enough, we keep going. So food is very critical, both for removing triggers that might be aggravating the situation and for healing the damage that has already been done. It's also going to help us open detox pathways, which is critical for these individuals. So food sensitivities, we're going to work with that first. Then we're going to work with opening up the detox pathways. We're going to do this through food, but we're also going to do this through lifestyle. So I'll go in a minute, I'll go into some of the beginner ways to do this. Once we've done everything we can with food and lifestyle, and we start in functional medicine, we start to get that person really good. They're mentally, emotionally, and physically able to deal with the environmental issues. So there's, again, beginner, middle, and more advanced ways to deal with these environmental issues, of which I'll get into those in just a moment. At the end, when somebody is strong enough and we've got all their detox pathways open, we can then add binders. So at that point, you may choose to do natural binders. Most of the binders used for prescription lower cholesterol. So if you've got high cholesterol, or if you don't mind lowering cholesterol, or if you have no qualms about cholesterol drugs, sometimes they even use statins. Sometimes they use something called cholestyramine or Welchol. Cholestyramine is the standard of care. There's even a natural one by Pure Encapsulations called Cholestipure that is a binder. I do not recommend using these without the guidance of a functional medicine doctor and regular testing, because if you do low cholesterol levels could actually lead to very, very shorten your lifespan and lead to stroke and other problems and exacerbations, including bipolar disorder, et cetera. So please do not do this on your own. But using those is definitely an option. There's also natural binders such as bentonite clay and charcoal, and sometimes they're used in combination together. So when a person gets to this point, we sit down with that person and we discuss where they want to go, how they feel about it, what they want to try first, what those costs and options would look like, and we decide that together so that they can make an informed decision. So at that point, we get them involved, and when your body is ready to do the hefty lifting, and if you are wanting to go past 75 to 95%, then that is where you go, is addressing the physical environment and going to binders. So I want to cover a couple things not to do without expert help. So this is the most important thing for me to beg you not to take huge expensive steps. Don't purchase things, don't remediate your home, don't move, don't even look for a new apartment without knowing what you're doing. Don't test your house. So here's a list. Do not remediate your house or move. There are specific checklists, protocols, and precautions when doing this that if they are not used, then you may waste time and money for nothing, and you may make yourself extremely sick and worse. So please don't do that without guidance. Number 2, do not buy any expensive household items or furniture, because many things will have to be thrown away when you change your environment, including things you already own. Many things cannot be taken with you because they will ruin the new environment. I got a question, can you ingest bentonite clay? Yes and no. So there is types that you can ingest. There are specific brands that I recommend. There are ones that are not for ingesting, but yes, you can. And I'll go into that if you'll ask me that question, and we'll ask me some more in-depth questions. I'll answer those more in depth about the bentonite clay. Okay, so the other thing is not to do. Don't hire a mold guy. So a mold guy is great. He has so much information that I would not even begin to pretend that I know. However, he needs information you don't have and that he doesn't have in order to make your house safe. He is educated to make your house safe in order for the majority of people, and that's great. But for the 25%, he does not have the information he needs to make your house safe to the level that you need it to be safe if you're dealing with this disease. So don't hold a mold guy, don't get mold testing. They will not do it right. Okay, the last thing is don't try to kill the mold. I know this sounds crazy. Oh my God, get rid of the mold, get rid of the mold. So one of the things that happens if you are in the house and you try to get rid of the mold is that you can make things worse. There's a whole bunch of caveats with this. For example, if you kill the mold, you will actually release a huge amount of mycotoxins that were not already released and release them all at once. This can make someone very sick. Taking care of the mold while you're in the house could also make you extremely sick. So again, that's one of the things is do not try to kill the mold. A small amount is not a big deal, but a large amount of mold, such as a huge mold problem, is a problem. So Sarah asked, if not calling a mold guy, then who to call? Well, the trick is to get somebody who understands what the mold guy doesn't know, then match them up with the mold guy so that they can both get on the same page, and together you have all the information. There are in some metropolitan areas mold guys who are certified to be able to do this, but I know that in my town of Birmingham, Alabama, there's nobody. So I'm actually working with the mold guy in my city to help him be educated so that he can be my go-to guy for my patients, so that they have someone who understands the level of mold renovation that they require for this disease. So he will be having to learn a whole new level of things. So eventually we'll call a mold guy, but we need to make sure that he's willing to do it the CIRS way. So yeah. Again, we also need to make sure that person has a safe place to go while their house is being remediated. If you are looking for a house, I looked for a house recently and I found that they say that 50% of infrastructure in America is water damage. I'm going to tell you it's a lot more. Finding a house that doesn't have water damage is next to impossible. And then building one has POCs and PVCs and all these things exuding from the house for up to 2 years. So that's a conversation I would definitely have one-on-one with that person so that we can weigh the pros and the cons and decide which is best for you. So another thing that I'll tell people not to do without expert help is do not get tested unless by an educated and experienced practitioner. If they use the wrong labs, then all your tests will have to be redone. Also, get your house tested. An air test is not going to be qualified. It has to be an Hertzme test. There's a place online called mycometrics.com, and they will sell you a Hertzme test and then translate it into a Hertzme, which is a scoring system. But you won't know what your score needs to be unless you have a C4A and an MSH, which has to be come through specific labs. So I can get more into that on a one-on-one basis so we can work out the pros and cons for you individually and see which help you make an educated decision. So finally, I want to tell you what you can do now to help yourself immediately. So I'm going to go through, I actually have two lists in front of me. One was my outline for the talk, and the other one is the actual from the handout that I will be giving away at the end of this talk. Does getting an air purifier help? Yes and no. So you want a Hepa filter. That is one thing that you can do. However, you want to do a little bit of research, because if you get a Hepa filter now, it's only going to make a dent. Like it'll take away like 5% of the mold, but it will take away enough to where many people will have a slight improvement in their health by having that around. I personally have a Hepa filter, one on both floors. I have a very small house, so I only needed 2. I sleep with it. It runs 24/7. It made a dent, but it's not going to fix it by any means. However, I was very lucky that I bought the type that when I move into my clean, perfect environment, many filters will have to be thrown away and replaced. They will not be able to come to that new environment. To kind of give you an idea, any kind of venting or screening system, such as like the one on the back of your hair dryer, like where the vent is on there, if anything with that cannot be cleaned and will have to be thrown away. And so you have to be able to clean it. So there's a couple different ones. Right here, Ali's mentioned the IQ Air. That is a highly recommended one. Any HEPA filter is recommended, but there's all sorts of things. Killing the mold through the filter could be a little bit risky because you could release mycotoxins, so make sure they're sucking up the mycotoxins as well. I love that it also removes formaldehyde. That is also a big problem with a lot of these people. So here's some things you could do now. Number one is get fresh air. As I mentioned, a lot of people feel better when they get more fresh air. Some people are going to feel worse if they're dealing with environmental allergies, but a lot of people feel better at the beach or in the mountains. A lot of people feel when it's cold because there's less pollen and because they're heat sensitive. So one thing I noticed when I started dealing with this originally was I would go camping for about 4 days, and I'd basically be sitting under a tree that was feeding me oxygen for 4 days straight, and I would be better for a month. A significant difference. Now that I've improved about 95%, that improvement isn't as noticeable, but oxygen and that fresh air and being away from the source was very helpful to me. Amy asked, can ozone be helpful if done properly? So yes, it kills mold and mycotoxins. However, it is extremely dangerous. Breathing the ozone can exacerbate anyone with lung problems, especially when it's done multiple times over time. You also would have to leave the house for anywhere from 24 hours to weeks to do this. You would have to run it with no one there. You would have to turn it off without breathing any. Then you would have to open the doors and then air out the place completely before you could come in. As you can see, this could be weeks of process. It's also been known to ruin electronics, rubber dials, anything with rubber, the elastic in your socks. So would you want to do this in your home? I think it's debatable. Even doing it for a hotel, there's a debate. Some people do it and they still feel a lot better. Other people, they could be exposing themselves to the ozone themselves and be causing a problem specifically in the lungs and other places. So I would use extreme caution, do a lot of research before you figure out if that's right for you. I personally decided against it because I felt that the risks outweighed the benefits and that there were other ways to address that. Okay, so that answers that question. So get fresh air. The other thing we could do is open windows. Now, opening windows is kind of a caveat. It can let in moisture, but it also lets in oxygen. So a lot of people, while they're in an imperfect environment, will let air in so that they are diluting the amount of mycotoxins in the air and more oxygen, and they do feel a significant amount of difference. For example, if you can't get outside first thing in the morning, which I highly recommend, is very first thing in the morning, go outside, drink your coffee outside, drink your tea outside, go for a walk, whatever you got to do, it will make a difference in the rest of your day. It will make or break your day. But just opening the windows, if that's all you can do, will make a big difference. Now, once you're in a perfect environment, you would want to, every time you would want to have a dehumidifier to protect the environment. I would not use a dehumidifier in the imperfect environment, mainly because not unless you were willing to replace that as soon as you move, because it would have to be thrown away. So just know that. Let's see, what else? Take walks. So walking first thing in the morning, a lot of my patients do that. It not only helps them get that oxygen first thing in the morning and helps them right after they wake up, it also helps reset circadian rhythms. A lot of them have hormonal and adrenal issues. That's kind of a common thing among these is adrenals that just don't go away with treatment. They're there for years, even with functional medicine. That's a big sign that you're dealing with mold or CIRS. But taking a walk first thing in the morning helps you on multiple levels, both with improving oxygen to the brain, improving energy levels. Just don't overdo it. Spending time outdoors. So if it's nice weather outside, go out and read, spend time in the park, less time in your house, the better. That's just reducing your exposure overall. So the next one, we talked about the Hepa filter. So this only helps a little and by no means is a perfect solution, but they can make a dent in the mold spores and therefore the toxins. So don't buy one with any filters that cannot be removed or you will have to throw it away. Even something like a vent in a hairdryer will have to be thrown away when you fix the environment. So look for one that will either be able to be cleaned, the filter's removable, and inexpensive so that you don't cry when you have to throw it away later. So the next, the proper way of taking care of the mold. Again, that it's kind of, I'm going to discuss that more in talk 3, when I talk about the long term. We're going to talk about the end game in my, in not talk 3, my second talk on mold and toxins. Today I'm going to start about where to begin and where to go next, but in my next talk I'll be talking about the end game, and that's fixing your environment. So we'll dive a little bit more on that. So please bring that question back on that, on how to address it properly, because that's a humongous discussion and I wanted to save a whole talk for it. So meantime, you can crowd out your diet with vegetables, particularly leafy greens, sulfurous vegetables, and brightly colored. I would use the majority. A lot of times to repair damage, I use the Wahls protocol. Not only to repair damage, but also to open up detox pathways by getting a minimum of 9 cups of vegetables. If you want to know more about the Wahls protocol, I'd start with her YouTube video. You can look up Dr. Terry Wahls, Mighty in Your Mitochondria. She'll give you the basics that you can start with until you can get her book. The Wahls protocol that will outline it in detail. This is really great for opening up detox pathways and repairing, especially the neurological damage, but basically the damage of every cell in your body. So any promise with essential oils combating mold issues? Yes and no. So a lot of people with the chemical sensitivities can be flared by essential oils. So you have some pros and you have some cons. So far, I have not found anyone who is flared by the essential oil peppermint. However, a lot of people have problems with things like Christmas trees and plants because of the phenols that are released from the plant. These phenols are some of the things that are in the essential oil. So a lot of people are irritated, and every case is different. So everyone's irritated by different oils. So I would say listen to your own body. If an oil irritates you, then I wouldn't use it. I would stay away from it. If an oil, if you're just drawn to it instinctively or it makes you feel better, then definitely use it. PubMed actually has an article on essential oils and mycotoxins. The ones that are specifically called out for mycotoxins are lemongrass, cinnamon, sage, oregano, thyme, and I think that's it. These are different than antifungal mycotoxins, so maybe blending the two would be a great thing. So I would do that, a very big thing. So if you have, as Ali mentioned, she can't do lavender. I really am like against, like me, is patchouli and sandalwood and all those low tones. But I find a lot of people are having doing better with some of the cleaner ones like tea tree or peppermints. Peppermint seems to be pretty neutral. But for the treating it, you just kind of have to use your own judgment. I would start with the ones that are anti-mycotoxin and use the ones that don't bother you. Thank you, Allie, for typing up those essential oils. Those are not for mold. Actually, they are for the mycotoxins specifically. The other ones are for mold. So, you know, use your own judgment. If it doesn't make you feel good, don't do it. So the next thing I talk about, I like eucalyptus too. I see someone mention that. Those high notes like eucalyptus, tea tree oil, and peppermint, they seem to be pretty neutral, but you know, if it bothers you, don't do it. Can you use oils topically on your gut to detox? They can assist, but I would combine them with other efforts. So some of those other efforts speaking of, we're going to use talking about opening up detox pathways. So these are going to be things like detox baths, cardiovascular exercise, lifting weights, if possible. You may not be able to start there. Getting the fresh air, infrared sauna, dry brushing, juicing. It tends to make people feel really good, especially low sugar ones, so you don't mess up your inflammation levels. There's all sorts of things. So that's where I would start with like food and lifestyle. When you get there, you can just keep adding layers and adding layers, trying things, see what makes you feel good and see what does not make you. Lymphatic massage, absolutely. I often do lymphatic massage with my dry brush. That's something that I really, really think is a good idea. Getting massages and say, hey, I want a detox massage, and let that guy, you know, or a girl help you with that is a great idea. Anything you can do, rebounding, you name it, do it. And if you can't do some of them, then you know what, start with the ones you can and just build up to the ones that are later. Yoga is another really good one, etc. So we definitely want to do everything we can to open up our detox pathways, adding layer after layer. So start with one layer, start with easy. When you get a hold of those, add another layer, add more. When you do a little bit more, add a little bit more. If you detox too quickly, especially with not having those pathways open, it can make you sick. So listen to your body. If you're having a Herx reaction, it's because these toxins have nowhere to go and your detox pathways are not open enough to use that form. So either back off or start with something that's a little bit more comfortable. You can also do IV therapy. I love IV therapy. I use glutathione. A lot of them are made from gluten, corn, or cross-reactives. So definitely investigate if you're super sensitive. The other ones that you can do to your physical environment right now is to keep a super clean house. These molds are in dust. That's why they can't beat air. So keeping your house super clean, cleaning it with non-toxic cleaners, anti-mycotoxin ingredients such as the same thyme, cinnamon, lemongrass essential oils as tolerated, reduce your toxins, those kind of things. You also want to remove clutter. You want to throw away, donate, or box up all non-essential, I want you to listen very carefully here, porous items that cannot be thrown in a washer. So like clothing, towels, blankets, they can be thrown in a washer. You can clean them weekly and regularly to reduce, porous items store the mycotoxins. Things like books will either need to be given away, donated, even pictures, family pictures. That's one of the hard ones that we hear about, or with me, it's books that were leather-bound editions handed from my grandmother. So I was not ready to donate them or give them away or anything like that. So I put them in an airtight container. I can visit them anytime I want. Pictures can be laminated so that they can be kept and used out. Couches, when you move, will need to be thrown away. I would not replace them because they'll just be ruined. If you get a new couch or a new mattress in an imperfect environment, you will have to throw them away when you get to a perfect environment. These things cannot be cleaned, so it just is what it is until you can fix the environment and buy a new couch or a new bed. That includes the things like that I mentioned before, like filters and dehumidifiers and brushes and hairbrushes and hair dryers and basically there's a whole process to moving or addressing those kind of things, or you're addressing your personal possessions in that process. So I'll go more into that in my next talk. So after you remove the clutter, keep a super clean house, throw away, donate, or box up all non-essential porous items. I got rid of all my art. That was a really hard one, but it was worth it to me. I waited until I was ready, and then I did it. So personally, I work under functional medicine doctor, and by doing this, I'm able to provide my patients with more bang for their buck and kind of one-stop shopping. So the one thing I will say is also be prepared to spend money on this to get well. It's not cheap. I'm just going to be honest. There are cheaper ways to do it. For example, seeing a shoe doc in Atlanta, it's about $5,000 for the first visit, where mine's not even close to that. So every journey will be different, and how far you decide to go, there's options is the point. So just know that this is something that is not something that's going to be $200 and you're fixed. It's going to be a long-term journey, but you will get better every year, and by next year you can have your life back. So I think that's very motivating, very, very motivating. And so, so just be prepared to spend a little bit of money. Each provider will be different. So you can get a free consult through my office. I work for Integrative Health Center of Alabama. So if you would like to, we don't work with everybody though. So if you would like to get a free consult to see if you qualify for one of our programs or office, you will need to call the office to make an appointment. We do take appointments over video chat, such as Zoom or other video conference, but you will still have to call the office for scheduling. Will have to be accepted as a case. Because of the nature of the case, I don't take everyone because I don't have a room for everybody. And I want to make sure that the cases I do know is that they're properly motivated, they're committed to the journey, and that I can really help them with the best of my ability, because this is complex and it's not easy and it's hard. So you shouldn't have to do it alone now. So as these cases are complex and time consuming, we only can accept some of the applicants based on our assessment of their ability to get well. This is determined by whether or not we can help them and whether or not that person is able to help themselves. So if someone wants to make the appointment, just let the receptionist know that you've been approved for video chat consult, and you want to make an appointment with Rebecca. The phone number there is 205-994-7313. So next time I'll be back, and at that time we will be discussing the next step, which is how to test your environment, what the next steps in the journey should be after the HLA test, after the food and lifestyle changes, and after decluttering your environment. So I'll be talking more about that. I also promised you guys a free gift, so exclusive for you today. If you will go to www.mycrazyjourney.com/autoimmune mastermind, I have that page is just for the people from this autoimmune mastermind, and you will get to sign up for my newsletter and find out other offers, other recipes, other events, things like that, but you'll also get that handout I talked. This handout is actually going to cover a lot of what I covered today, as well as what I covered next time. So I'll go over a little bit of that. It gives you a journey overview of like what outlines the journey for you. It also tells you, has a section called What We Can Do Now, which are some of the things that you can do right now to get started in healing. It also tells you what you can do next, which are things like the Hepa filter, decluttering your environment, further decluttering your environment, you know, what you can do to your environment to make it a little bit better while you're looking for a more perfect environment. And it also has a section that talks about the end game. And that end game is addressing that environment. You know, more so, such as remediating, moving, what to avoid in your new house and things like that, finding temporary housing. And also a little encouragement, such as things like take it one step at a time, you know, do what you can do today and only focus on that. Don't focus on the things that are hard and overwhelming. You can think about that tomorrow. Yes, I know I just quoted Scarlett O'Hara, but it's true. Only focus on the things that are tangible and easy. It also tells you a couple things to avoid until you are symptom free. Certain fishes that you shouldn't be eating, certain food groups that might be harmful to you until you at least have the gene test, activities to avoid, and again, that list of things not to try to do on your own. So that handout is invaluable to someone who either wants to help get started with help, who wants to get started today, or wants to get started of their own and see where they can get. So whatever you do, just please, you know, that handout is going to be very helpful. So I'm open to taking any questions. So if there's any questions that I did not answer, this is a great time to type them into the box. So I'm going to go through and see if there's any ones that I haven't answered. So I'm going to scroll through. Let's see. Let's see, I'm going to expand that real quick so I can see them a little bit better. Okay, so Jess said something about like nothing about being afraid of air, food, walls, et cetera, trust me, yes. You should have. I put something in my mouth the other day and spit it out like projectile because I got scared of some of the things that were in it. So yes, we talked about ingesting bentonite. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. You would do it in water. You want to make sure that it is a good source. There are bad sources. I've gotten some that later had a recall because they had lead and other things in them. Well, because they do attract metals. There's also a proper way of handling them and using them before you ingest them. And so those things are extremely important to know and go through before you do that. Brands of clay, I believe there's a brand called White Plains, and that one is very clean. Clay washing with Hla Test, absolutely. If bentonite clay in your baths, again, definitely, or even foot baths if you're not into messing up your bathtub. It's very messy for those who haven't tried it. Clay washing is a really good idea. It's a way of detoxifying, but again, you know, make sure it's a good source. Make sure you're not bathing in lead or mercury. Let's see if there's any. I think there's some more here down the bottom. Oh, good, Sarah. Yes, so you love terry walls too. Yeah, using oils, they're a great support system. So I would definitely, like, I use a purification oil. I haven't noticed a big difference with it, but I'm going to try it and see how it makes me feel. I also do them in my house to reduce mold and mycotoxins. For some reason, I'm very drawn to tea tree. So if you're very drawn to one or the other, then all means, I say follow your instincts. Okay, yeah, so we had a couple comments on the Herxheimer. Yes, with these people, you have impaired detoxification. So having Herxheimer is definitely a bad sign because it means you're just circulating those and making things worse. You're not getting rid of them. So it's definitely not like a good sign. Well, washing clothes with vinegar and essential oils remove mycotoxins. Washing them with anything will remove mycotoxins, at least until they are back in your house collecting mycotoxins again. So making sure you, like my bed sheets, I wash them every single week. Vinegar might help, but I would rather you not use vinegar. Some people who are reacting to the mold, especially if they carry celiac gene, might also react to the vinegar in the yeast in the vinegar. So they're in the same, I think, kingdom or something, the fungi kingdom. I don't remember exactly, but some people will react to yeast and some will not. And some is, if you have a leaky gut, could lose yeast in the process. So inhaling it could be questionable, especially for the super sensitive people. Other things that will kill mold and mycotoxins would be hydrogen peroxide and essential oils, as well as baking soda. So those are good alternatives to vinegar if you aren't sure about your yeast status. Mycotoxins, what are they? They are the toxins released by the mold. So it's not the mold that's making us sick, at least not all of us. Some of us, it is the mold also making us sick, especially if we're cross-reacting from celiac, but it's the toxins that are released off of them. So Angela, you mentioned that you're overwhelmed. You're absolutely right. This is very overwhelming. It's one of the reasons I didn't do all the talk in one talk. So my best advice to those who are overwhelmed, like Angela mentioned, and Angela, first of all, I want to thank you for admitting that. Not everybody will admit that because they're afraid that they're the only people that are overwhelmed. This is very overwhelming. And I'll be the first to say, oh, heck yes, it is. So here's my response when a patient tells me that they're overwhelmed. So be overwhelmed. It sucks. It's yucky. Give yourself time for the information to process. And then once you have that time to process, you ignore everything but what you can do right now. And that means you can eat clean, you can clean your house really well, and you can get some fresh air, and you can take a detox bath. So if you got nothing else from my talk today, that is where to begin. And you ignore everything else. So for those who are overwhelmed, get my handout. When you get my handout, I want you to look only at the part of what we can do now. I want you to take out a pen, and I want you to make check marks on the handout, and I want you to check off all the parts that are easy. Do those. Do nothing else. Ignore everything else. Just check off the ones that are easy and start there. This will make it a million times less overwhelming. Then I want you to put that handout away, and once you get used to that and you're ready to add to your progress, you take it out again and you make some new check marks. That is how you do it, one day at a time. So mold is hard to get rid of. It's so dangerous to people. Even people who don't have the genetic combination can react to it, but they get better as soon as they're out of it. So it's tied to a whole bunch of horrible things. So Kaylee says, we had to go through all of this, got rid of everything. It's hard, but it feels better now. So yeah, it does. And like I said, you can get 75 to 95% there without addressing the environment. I'm a perfect example. I waited till last moment. I've been on my healing journey for 3 years. I have not addressed my environment. I just started to look for a new house this year, and I've been able to take back 95% of my life and could sustain this forever, able to have a full life, full capable abilities with the help of my protocols and functional medicine support. Can I get there all the way and be off all my functional medicines? I can't, but some people will say, you know what, this is good enough, and that's okay if they choose to do that. Yes, so Ali mentioned that I will have 2 more additional talks. So the next one I'm going to be talking about addressing the environment, and the third one we'll be talking about addressing this from a functional medicine standpoint. So all I want people to take away today is where to begin. Start with cleaning up your diet, start with detoxing lifestyle and food, and start with having a cleaner home environment, and just with the easy things you can do. I'll go more into that there. Jenny mentions it's hard. Yes, it is. So one day at a time. Let's see. Rebecca, what are your thoughts on cholestyramine in terms of crazy additives, fillers? Do you prefer natural binders or do you like it compounded? That is a really hard thing to say. On an elimination diet, I don't like starting with it because I can't say for certain cholestyramine what its additives are because we don't work with prescriptions in my office. However, many prescriptions have corn, gluten, other things like that that could also trigger the very disease, the symptoms that they are trying to have, specifically people who carry a celiac gene, who are having neurological celiac genes, and maybe they don't even know it, and people who have a mast cell activation disorder, these could very trigger. The other thing that I find, and I'll talk to, this is a very minor group of people, but if you have a low cholesterol, these could be dangerous binders. Again, some people also have a big thing against prescriptions because they're really weary, like what are the side effects, especially because we're using this to bind to these toxins and pull it out of your body when your body's strong enough. However, there's a debate on do I give it at the beginning or wait till their environment's perfect? Well, I think every case is different. But then there's also the thing is what about people who are being re-exposed and re-exposed? For example, I have a friend, she's in a clean environment, but if she goes into a building, she has to run back to cholestyramine and use it again. What are the long-term effects of these things? There's even been doctors who've used statins, which, to put it oversimplified, shut down your liver? What are the long-term things about this? So I think that's just something that really, I don't think I'm really the person to make that decision. I think it's options to be given, a discussion to have with the individual between them and their doctor. I'll be happy to discuss it with them so that they can, point them in the right direction of gathering that information, but I don't think I'm the right person to do that. All supplements are a danger, and so you're always weighing the good against the bad, especially with these elimination diets, and some can wait, some cannot. So how do you know if this is a problem for you as opposed to other causes of severe fatigue and illness? That is an excellent question, Diana. Thank you so much for that. So first of all, I would go to survivingmold.com and look under the symptoms. If you have even 10 of the symptoms, even if they're only sometimes, then you need to get an HLA test. How do I know if this is a problem for you? Well, if you get an HLA test and the HLA DRB comes back and says you have the genetic combination and you're having all the symptoms, and we have no other reason for you to have severe fatigue or illness, then you look like a duck, you act like a duck, you walk like a duck, you have the genetics of a duck, and you're quacking. So I'm going to call you a duck. So that's a crazy thing. So I'm going to give you a couple examples. Say I have a patient who comes in and we've, Dr. Isabella Wentz says there's 2 different types of autoimmune. There's those who you can heal their gut and clean up their diet and they're good. And then there's those who have layers. So if I have healed your gut, cleaned up your diet, and you're still having leaky gut syndromes, or I've treated your adrenals and you're still having adrenal fatigue, or I've done everything and you're still having symptoms and you still have autoimmune disease, then I have to ask yourself, what is telling your body that there's a foreign invader that your body is confusing with your own body? So let's say you had hemolytic anemias where the body attacks the red blood cells. So I've healed your gut, I've cleaned up your diet. There's no reason to have your body at war with anything. So I have to figure out, okay, there's a toxin. There's a toxin that's signaling the body to attack the body. So I have to figure out what the toxin is. The HLA-DRB will help me narrow that down. It'll tell me what I'm looking for. Am I looking for a chemical? Am I looking for a mold? Am I looking for all of the above? Am I looking for a biotoxin? That's where to begin. And so far, every time I look for that next layer with the HLA, I get answers. And so let's see, repeat the website. One of the websites I mentioned was survivingmold.com. If you search that website, there's a list of symptoms. If you're looking for the free gift, it's mycrazyjourney.com/autoimmune mastermind. That is the free handout given to exclusive to the attendees of this talk that will help you get started. And okay. So Angela says, thanks so much for the bottom of your heart. Thank you, Angela. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Leslie. Thank you, Allie. Thank you to all the people, Kaylee, all the people that tuned in. I just really appreciate it. I love sharing this information and I love helping people. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to help you with your journey. And please go ahead and get the handout, get started today with the things that you can control and let go of the things that you can't. And let this process, I'll be back in a week to talk about addressing the environment, and I'm really happy. So thank you so much today. Link isn't working if you want to repost. Okay, so let me go grab that link for the free handout, and let me post it to you. There we go. Sorry, I can't type apparently. Let's see. Make sure it come up. Okay. So I'm going to go look at there. It sounds like I need to go ahead and do that. Looks like something's wrong with my link. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post that link just as soon as I hang up on this. I'm going to go figure out why the page didn't publish or whatever, and then I'll repost it. So look for that in just a few minutes, and I'll have it fixed for you soon. Thanks a lot, everybody. Thanks so much. Thanks for all your love. I'll talk to you later. Bye.